Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions, the mystery of Tartaria, the phantom empire scrubbed from history. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. On every major European map published between 1600 and 1800, a vast territory called Grand Tartary stretched across most of the Asian continent from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean. It was consistently depicted as the largest political entity on Earth, larger than Russia, larger than China, larger than the entire British Empire would ever become. Dutch cartographer Abraham Ortelius first named it in his 1570 atlas, and for 200 years, every serious mapmaker in Europe included it as standard geography. Then, in the 19th century, Tartaria vanished, not from the land, but from the maps entirely. For most historians, the explanation is simple. Tartary was never a unified empire, but a geographic label for the vast unconquered Eurasian interior, inhabited by Turkic and Mongol peoples. When Russia expanded eastward and named those territories, the old designation became obsolete. But in recent years, a viral conspiracy theory has claimed something far more dramatic, that Tartaria was a real global civilization with advanced technology, deliberately erased from history by shadowy elites, its cities buried under a mysterious mud flood in the early 19th century. The conspiracy is demonstrably false, but it raises a question no one has cleanly answered. Why did the largest territory on every European map for 2 full centuries disappear so completely from our collective historical memory? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The ocean has a long memory. As the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, sea levels worldwide rose by more than 120 meters, enough to drown entire coastal civilizations that may have flourished along shorelines that no longer exist. The continental shelves that now lie submerged beneath shallow coastal seas were once habitable land. River deltas, bays, and estuaries that today lie underwater were once the most attractive real estate on Earth, rich in resources, temperate in climate, and accessible by sea. If ancient peoples built their settlements where resources were most abundant, then much of the archaeological record of early civilization may be sitting on the ocean floor, invisible to conventional excavation. This is not speculation. Marine archaeologists have already found submerged ruins at dozens of locations worldwide, off the coasts of India, Japan, Cuba, and the Mediterranean islands. In some cases, these structures are clearly artificial: stone walls, carved steps, and rectilinear platforms that could not have formed naturally. The academic debate is not whether these structures exist, but what they mean. Were they built by unknown pre-flood cultures, or were they coastal settlements of known civilizations gradually abandoned as waters rose? The answer, in many cases, remains open. What oral traditions add to this picture is equally significant. Cultures living on or near the sea throughout the tropics and subtropics carry remarkably consistent flood narratives, stories of a great inundation that drowned an earlier world. These are not borrowed from one another through colonial contact. They predate European exploration. They appear to be independent memories of a shared catastrophe, the end of the last ice age, when the world coastlines changed forever and entire ways of life were drowned. The civilizations that built on those shores, if they existed, vanished beneath the waves. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns, in science, demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding Tartaria, the Phantom Empire scrubbed from history, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The term Tartary appeared in Abraham Ortelius's groundbreaking 1570 Atlas Theatrum Orbis Terrarum, the first standardized world atlas, mapped as a massive territory across Central Asia and Siberia. Over the following 2 centuries, cartographers including Mercator, Bliu, Hondius, and Sanson incorporated Tartary as a standard geographic designation, sometimes subdividing it into Muscovite Tartary, Chinese Tartary, and independent Tartary, reflecting the genuine complexity of the region's political landscape. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered Grand Tartary on 18th century European maps encompassed modern Russia east of the Urals, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and portions of China, over 20 million square kilometers. Contemporary writers, including John Bell, who traveled through Siberia in 1715 on behalf of Peter the Great, documented Tatar and Mongol peoples across these regions. The geographic label reflected European uncertainty about who governed these vast interior spaces rather than any single unified political reality on the ground. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine the disappearance of Tartary from maps corresponded directly with Russian imperial expansion. Beginning under Peter the Great and accelerating through Catherine the Great's reign, Russia systematically conquered and administered the territories lumped under the Tartary label. By 1800, Russia had imposed European political categories across the entire region, and once every province and khanate had a Russian name and governor, the cartographic label became obsolete and faded from all subsequent European atlases. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, in the 2010, a viral conspiracy theory claimed Tartaria was an advanced global civilization destroyed by a so-called mud flood in the early 19th century, supposedly burying buildings across the world. Proponents cite semi-subterranean windows in Victorian architecture as evidence. Architects and historians have straightforwardly explained these as standard raised foundation construction. No geological evidence of any global mud event exists, and primary sources from European archives directly contradict every core claim. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the Tatar peoples are real, Turkic-speaking Muslims with a documented history from the Mongol Empire through the Kazan Khanate, conquered by Ivan the Terrible in 1552, to the modern Republic of Tatarstan in the Russian Federation, where over 5 million Tatars live today. Crimean Tatars survived Stalinist mass deportation in 1944 and decades of Soviet oppression. The conspiracy theories' appropriation of their living history for fictional claims about a suppressed civilization causes genuine harm to these communities. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. After the fracture of the Mongol Empire following Urgide Khan's death in 1241, Western territories split into successor states: the Golden Horde controlling Russia and the Pontic Steppe, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Ilkhanate in Persia. European cartographers unable to track these shifting polities applied the Tartary label broadly. By the 16th century, dozens of actual khanates, Kazan, Astrakhan, Crimea, Siberia, were the political reality that the single Tartary label imprecisely obscured. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Tartaria, the phantom empire scrubbed from history. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that proponents of the suppressed civilization reading, including YouTube creators such as New Earth and John Levy, argue that Tartaria was a globe-spanning advanced civilization with free energy technology, deliberately destroyed and erased by 19th century elites using a manufactured mud flood. Historians, geologists, and archaeologists reject every claim entirely. No archaeological, geological, or documentary evidence supports any core assertion, and extensive European archival records directly contradict the narrative of deliberate suppression of a lost empire. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the mainstream scholarly explanation, supported by historians including Denis Sinner and Peter Golden, holds that Tartary was purely a geographic label applied by European cartographers to the vast Eurasian interior. They could not precisely map or politically categorize. It never denoted a single polity. The main objection from popular audiences is that the consistency of the label across 2 centuries of authoritative cartography seems to imply something more concrete than mere geographic vagueness. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that a refinement advanced by Eurasian historians holds that Tartary legitimately designated the loose network of Mongol successor khanates controlling Central Asia after 1241, real states with real rulers, simply poorly understood by Europe and observers who lumped them together. The objection is that the khanates were never politically unified, so the collective label obscured more than it revealed, which is precisely why it dissolved as European geographic knowledge of the region became more precise. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Tartaria, the phantom empire scrubbed from history, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes Gerard Mercator's 1569 world map, still the model for modern cartographic projections, clearly labels Tartaria across the northern interior of Asia. Mercator, the most rigorous cartographer of his era, consulted Marco Polo's accounts and Jesuit travel reports. The inclusion of Tartary on his authoritative projection confirms it was a serious geographic concept reflecting genuine, if incomplete, European knowledge of the region, not a fanciful or invented designation. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented Joan Blieu's Atlas Major, published in Amsterdam in 1662, and the most expensive and detailed atlas of the 17th century, devoted an entire volume to Tartaria and Persia, including maps of subregions with named towns and trade routes. Considered authoritative by European courts, its detailed treatment of Tartary demonstrates that the disappearance of the name in the 19th century was a political and cartographic development, not evidence of any deliberate historical erasure. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed Tatar place names persist across Central Asia and Russia as direct physical evidence of the historical presence the Tartary label described. The Tatar Strait between Russia and Sakhalin Island, the city of Kazan, capital of the historical Kazan Khanate, and dozens of rivers and settlements with Turkic Tatar names document centuries of cultural geography. The Republic of Tatarstan in Russia operates a Tatar language television network and university system, confirming the living continuity of this history. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, That convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Tartaria, the Phantom Empire scrubbed from history. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The legitimate history of Tartary is well documented. European cartographers used the name for territories they could not precisely define. Real Tatar peoples inhabited those regions for centuries, and Russian imperialism replaced the vague label with governed provinces. Historians including Denis Sinner at Indiana University and Peter Golden at Rutgers have documented this history in detail. The tragedy of the Tartaria conspiracy movement is that it replaces a genuine and important history, the survival, persecution, and cultural resilience of Tatar peoples through Mongol, Russian, and Soviet rule, with an invented fantasy. Cartographic history, tracking how European knowledge of Asia evolved through Ortelius, Mercator, and Bliu, is a legitimate academic discipline that the conspiracy has made significantly harder to discuss in public. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Tartaria, the Phantom Empire scrubbed from history, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Tartaria ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process, and the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.